Hi everyone, welcome to my Euro 2024 predictions video. In less than 4.5 hours, almost exactly now, it all begins. The opening game between Germany and Scotland, of course. So if you're English, it's kind of needles versus electric chair situation. But being partly Scottish myself, nothing against Germany, but I will be supporting Scotland in this one. I don't expect them to win. So, without further ado, let's get down to business, and I'm going to go through all the groups. I'm going to predict where I think each team will finish in the groups, which teams will qualify and which will not. And rather than map out the entire draw, I'm going to list who I think will win in each in each of the second round and quarter-final games, and then move on to the semis and the final. Okay, we start with Group A. Teams are Germany, Scotland, Hungary and Switzerland. Now, Scotland were very impressive in qualifying, perhaps more so than they ever have been. Surprisingly, in fact. But their form, I think they only won their first game in 8, and it was against someone like Gibraltar. I don't really follow friendlies, so someone correct me if they know. That form is hardly encouraging, although they do have a lot of good Premiership players, such as, of course, Robertson and Gilmour and Tierney. So, and McGinn, you know, they are, and top players were Rangers and Celtic, of course, so they can't be ruled out entirely. I think Germany will win tonight by a narrow margin. I think it'll be a 2-1 or a 1-0. Germany do take a while to get going in major tournaments. As hosts, they should be one of the favourites, but I think on paper and the players they have at the moment, they shouldn't be fancied to win. Nonetheless, I will say Scotland will gain a draw with Switzerland. They, of course, gained a draw with England in the last World Cup, the last Euros, in fact. So, now Switzerland always seem to make the second round, whilst I think on this occasion they'll finish third. Their squad, they've got a lot of injuries. They are not in good form. Hungary looked very impressive in the Nations League before last. Of course, to beat England 4-0 in Wolverhampton, around the corner from where I used to live. That's probably the only good thing about that game, is I used to live around the corner from where it happened when I was a student. But anyway, so yeah, Group A, Germany to win I think is obvious, despite the fact they're not in the best of form, although their form, albeit only in friendlies, has improved since Julian Nagelsmann took over from Hansi Flick. Nonetheless, Germany will win the group. Hungary to finish second. Switzerland in third. I will list who I think the qualifiers in third place will be at the end of the groups. Scotland, unfortunately, I think will gain a 1-1 draw with Switzerland, but will be beaten in their final game by Hungary, which means they will be eliminated. Unfortunately, fate is fate. They've never qualified, of course, from any group stage in any tournament before. For a while, it was looking like this could be the time where it changes, but I just think, push comes to shove, it'll just be beyond them. Moving on to Group B, the Group of Death, undoubtedly, I think. Although perhaps Group D might have something to say about that. Anyway, Spain, the twice European champions and world champions of 2010. Croatia, World Cup finalists, World Cup semi-finalists, Nations League finalists as well, where they lost to Spain, incidentally, and the reigning European champions, Italy. I cannot to remember that, but oh well. And Albania. Poor things. I actually think Albania may get a draw with Italy. Italy, less convincing in qualifying, only qualified on goal difference ahead of Ukraine. So I think Spain and Croatia will draw and will finish level on points, and Spain will finish ahead on goal difference. Although I think Croatia might draw with Italy, in fact. Croatia will finish second. Italy, I think, will finish third. Albania, I think it's a no-brainer. They're going to finish last. But let's not... I remember Hungary in the last Euros, they had, I think, France, Germany and Portugal in their group. Yet they still only narrowly missed out, gained draws with 2 of those teams. I think they will quite possibly gain a draw and a point. Moving on now, and it's England's group, Group C, alongside Serbia, Slovenia and Denmark. Now, Denmark appear to be the obvious favourites to join England, most likely in second place. England have never won all three of their group stages of the Euros. Only once in any major tournament, that was in the World Cup of 1982, that England have won all three group games. You sense this could be the time to change, but how many times have we said that? You know, the recent, even the 3-0 victory against Bosnia was far from convincing, and the 1-0 against Iceland, the 1-0 defeat against Iceland, worrying, although I would say nothing more than a blip. Nonetheless, England always tend to draw at least one of their group games. I'm not sure if it will be against Serbia or Denmark, but I think the other will be a win, and the game against Slovenia will be a win as well. So England gain 7 points, as they normally do. I'm actually going to predict that Serbia will finish second. They've got a lot of talent in their squad, a lot of Premiership or ex-Premier League, in some cases, talent. Mitrovic, of course, will get goals, but we've seen at World Cups, this is actually the first European Championships they qualified for. Not, of course, withstanding the former Yugoslavia, but as an independent nation, this is actually the first, even though they qualified for 4 World Cups, if you include the partnership with Montenegro in 2006. They never got out of the group stage there, although they did beat Germany in 2010. So they win games, they score goals, they play very good football, they've got immensely talented players. Defensively, they're weak, which could hold them back. However, Slovenia, who could surprise people, that'll be a fiery local derby, a former Yugoslav derby, of course. And Denmark, who, incredible at the last Euros, despite obviously losing Christian Eriksen so early. Very, very disappointing at the World Cup. I was very surprised at how easily they collapsed against losing to France. Wasn't a shock, but failing to beat or score against Australia and Tunisia was a massive shock. So I will say, I'm actually going to stick my neck out and say that Denmark will finish last in their group once again. I have a particularly good Danish friend who follows football and Eurovision as well, who will not appreciate that. But nonetheless, we're cool. Group D, another one that could stake a claim for being the group of death. France, they haven't won the European Championship since 2000, but have made 3 out of the last major tournament finals, including, of course, winning the 2018 World Cup in Russia. With the talent they've got, you sense they should be obvious favourites to win the tournament. But they perhaps were last time as well, and nothing seems to go to plan, as we know, particularly in European Championships. The Netherlands are not fancied. I spoke to a Dutch couple who I met in a pub the other week. They were not in any way confident about their team's chances. However, I actually think they will surprise people. Austria did well at the last Euros, only lost to Italy in extra time. Even without David Alaba, they're still fancied by a lot of people. Poland, of course, they still have Lewandowski, although perhaps not what he was previously. But, of course, only qualified thanks to a penalty shootout win over Wales. So they will finish last, I believe. It's difficult to choose between the other three. I will go with the obvious prediction, which is France to win the group by perhaps a slender margin. Netherlands finish second, Austria third. It could easily be the other way round. I think France will finish at least second. Other than that, it's difficult to say. Group E now. There's an obvious winner here. Although, as I've said before, it's never that obvious. Belgium, Ukraine, Slovakia and Romania. Now, Belgium don't have quite the talent they did before, but Romelu Lukaku still scores goals. Kevin De Bruyne tears up defences in the Premier League for Manchester City. So with that kind of talent, you'd make them favourites against Ukraine. They might not have it all their own way. Did very well at the last Euros. They'll have a lot of support. They won't be able to rely on the televoters, of course, like they do in some contests. But anyhow, Belgium, I think, will win the group. Ukraine will challenge them, finishing second. I think they'll win both of their games against the other two teams. So it's between Romania and Slovakia for third place. Slovakia capitulated after beating Poland in their first game at the last Euros, losing 5-0 to Spain. Romania rarely qualify for tournaments these days. They're a long way behind the side that regularly used to not just qualify, but surprise people at tournaments such as USA 94. 30 years ago now, would you believe? So I would say Romania will finish last, and Slovakia in third place. Finally, we have Group F. Portugal, Georgia, Turkey, and Czechia. Not quite in that order in terms of seeding. Turkey, for some reason, are the top seed. Rather like Slovenia are the top seed in Group C. I don't quite understand that, but UEFA, go figure. Now, I think there's an obvious winner here. It will be Portugal. Even with Ronaldo, 39, he hasn't lost his passion, his energy, his talent. Portugal, one of the favourites to win, I think with good reason, although they showed against Morocco, who stunned everyone, of course, at the World Cup. They are fallible when it matters most. They did win, of course, in France. That was their first, finally gaining their first major tournament victory. I will say, this one could throw up some surprises. Georgia, you'd thought, if it weren't for Albania, they'd be the obvious whipping boys. However, I think they will gain at least a draw, or at least a goal, maybe even a win against one of those teams. Portugal and the Czechs, I think, will have too much. Their game against Turkey will be the most crucial. In fact, they play in their first game on Tuesday afternoon or evening, I think. I will say Portugal to win the group. I think it's hard to call second place. I don't think it will be Georgia. I have gone for them to finish last. I would love them to qualify, doing Iceland perhaps in 2016. I don't think that'll happen, but they have got, I'm not going to, Kvaratskhelia, I think it's pronounced, who was one of Napoli's key players in their title victory. So defences will be wary of him. If anyone's going to be a match winner for them, potentially, it will be him. And if they've qualified, they've proved that they're not the mugs that perhaps people thought. Equally, they could do a North Macedonia and lose all 3 of their games, which I hope they don't. Well, so, Turkey, having proved, obviously had a catastrophic showing at the last European Championships, but having proved since then, bearing in mind a third of Germany's population is ethnic Turkish, that will give them a psychological boost, if nothing else. So I think they will do rather better this time. It's questionable as to whether or not they'll qualify for the last 16. I think it's going to be very close between Czechia and Turkey, for Czechia, formerly known as the Czech Republic, of course. Just for clarity there. I will say Czechia will finish second by a narrow margin. Portugal, I think, will win all 3 of their group games, but let's not take anything for granted. So, qualifying as group winners, Germany, Spain, England, France, Belgium and Portugal. One of them will at least be wrong, because there's always an upset. I normally go for a lot of upsets, but I've gone for all the obvious winners this year, which for me is unusual. It just seems like there's obvious winners in most games. How often have we said that? Second place qualifiers will be Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, the Netherlands, Ukraine and Czechia. The teams, unfortunately, that will be eliminated are, Scotland. I'm partly Scottish myself, albeit a few generations back. But Albania, which is kind of obvious. Denmark, that might surprise people. I'll probably be wrong on that. Poland, despite having Lewandowski. Romania and Georgia. So, I've said them before the third place to give it a bit of climax, as it were. So the third place teams, I think, will be Switzerland, Italy, Slovenia, Austria, Slovakia and Turkey. Without any of them looking like they're going to threaten at this tournament, it's hard to call between which ones will and won't qualify. 4 do, if only for the sake of mathematics. I've never really liked that system that they had between 86 and 94 in the World Cup and 26 onwards in the Euros, of course. Certainly makes the group stages less competitive, and it encourages a lot of dour football. So, Switzerland, I think, will qualify very narrowly. Italy, as well, will qualify. Slovenia, very close. borderline qualifier, but I think will narrowly miss out. They were a borderline qualifier at Eurovision this year, but this time I don't think they'll quite be so lucky. Austria, definitely I think will qualify, so it's between now Slovakia from Group E and Turkey from Group F. And I'm going for Turkey. The support from the Germans, I think, will pull them through. I actually think there's a strong possibility they will finish in second above the Czechs. But they have a very good record against Czechia as well. But the game against Georgia, I think, is a crucial one for them. Because I think Czechia will likely beat Georgia, whereas Turkey, I'm not convinced, will. Anyway, moving on to the second round. I'm not going to list all the games because it's so hard to tell with all the... Because it's one dodgy result in the group stages and the whole thing's blown out of the water, and the third place teams are impossible to predict, you know, who's going to go into this group, who's going to go into that group. I'm not sure how UEFA do it really, but well, they manage, but mathematically I think it works out with probability with teams that go through and go out and go into one game. And anyway, the teams I think will progress from the second round, or round of 16 if you prefer, are Croatia, have them to beat Hungary on penalties. Germany, I think they'll beat Serbia. England, most likely against one of the third place teams, so you'd logically make England favourites, but this can never be too sure, especially with England. Spain, the Netherlands, Portugal, Belgium, and, surprise, surprise, La France. As an Englishman, I'm hoping they go out early. They did, of course, I remember, I was in Glasgow. I was there for the game the next day when Sweden lost to Ukraine 2-1. In the second round, I went to watch it at Hampden. I was watching the second round game in a hotel, I stayed in a hotel which was in kind of a load of, in a kind of a mini, well, not an industrial estate, it had a Nando's. So, yeah, no, it had a bar. I watched the game. It's 3-1 to France. There's 10 minutes left. So I think I'm going to go to Nando's, get some food, and then go back to my flat. So I keep checking the game on my phone. I didn't check for about 10 minutes. And I thought, right, France should have won by now. Let's check. 3-3, going to extra time. What? That was my reaction. And of course, Switzerland won on penalties, and I cheered very loudly. Felt bad for Mbappe missing the penalty at such a young age, but then he has won the World Cup, so don't think it'll haunt him that much, and he's certainly been on good form since then, so he's got to the World Cup final. Of course, he's not let it, scored a hat-trick at the World Cup final, so he's not let it. Anyway, that's just an interesting story, but you'd probably prefer... But anyway, it proves France are far from unbeatable. We move on now to the quarter-finals. I believe Germany will beat Spain on penalties. The Netherlands, I forget who they're due to play. I think it's Portugal, but I have them to win by a narrow margin, or possibly on penalties. England, I think, will narrowly emerge past Croatia. They're not what they were, England. Croatia, it would be difficult because Croatia always seemed to get... You saw the way they played the World Cup. They were outplayed by Japan and by Brazil. But they got the equaliser, they got it to penalties, and they did what they needed to do. They don't seem to be able to finish it when it matters, like against France in the World Cup, or Argentina in the semi, or Spain in the Nations League, or Switzerland in Eurovision. But nonetheless, I think England will have that bit of quality needed to get past them, perhaps narrowly. Would certainly make up for 2018 in Russia, when all Harry Kane had to do was pass to Raheem Sterling, and we're through. Oh well. And lastly, I think France will win their quarter-final, which means, of course, it's the dreaded semi-final that most people are predicting, England against France. First of all, though, the host Germany against the Netherlands. I will actually say, I mean, Germany as host, you can't rule them out simply because they're the hosts. However, I just don't think, when push comes to shove, they will have the quality or the form to beat the sides when it matters, even in front of their own fans, although that is the only thing that could pull them over the line and they could even win it. I've known a Germany side possibly the worst German side I've ever seen going into a tournament. We beat them 5-1 on penalties, of course, in Munich. That was their first ever defeat in a home qualifying match. They were, of course, beaten. They, I think, won all of their games apart from against Ireland. Got to the final. I mean, they weren't massively tested, which they will be here. But they did what they needed to do, and they still got to the final before Ronaldo and Brazil were just too strong. So what it proves is that, and particularly as that was in Japan and South Korea, this time they're hosting. So as host as well, you certainly can't rule them out, even if this is far from the strongest Germany squad. Although Julian Nagelsmann, in fairness to him, he's not managed at international level before, but we see the work he's done at Leipzig, albeit with a lot of money. And at Bayern Munich, he is a man that knows how to motivate and to inspire a team and to provide the tactic necessary. So, nonetheless, I have predicted a repeat of the semi-final in West Germany in 1988. It was the only tournament that the Netherlands have won to date. They recovered from a 1-0 deficit to win 2-1 in extra time, and I predicted them to do so again, although perhaps in the 90 minutes. Germany is host logical favourites in that game, I think. I think they would be logical favourites in any game up until the final. The big one, on the Wednesday, England against France. Obviously, my heart says England. The quality England have, and the form of a lot of players for club and country, would say England. But France, on current form, they're not. They haven't been in spectacular form. They've been patchy ever since winning the World Cup. Obviously, I mentioned their Euro exit to Switzerland 3 years ago. In Nations League game, in friendlies, even in some qualifiers, they have looked patchy. But they do turn up when it matters, getting to 3 of the last 4 finals, of course. I can't remember the last side that did that. Apart from Spain, obviously. But. So, much as it pains me to say it, it'll be a close. I think England have improved, whereas France arguably have got worse since the 2-1, where, of course, Harry Kane, normally so reliable from the spot, I think the pressure just got to him and he completely blazed it, as we remember. I will say once again, penalties will be the undoing, and it'll be a 2-2 draw, and France, unfortunately, I think will have the edge on penalties. They've been there, they've done it before in tournaments and on penalties. England, with the quality and the talent, no doubt, arguably not the tactics. Southgate's have been questioned by many, although I personally think he does. Tactics, I think, are questionable, but I think in all other aspects, like motivating the players and relationships with the players and the suitability of him to the job with the players we have, I think he ticks all the boxes. Tactics, I think he is questionable. I will say a heroic performance by England. Maybe not any kind of tactical disaster or scandal or injustice. I just think France will be the marginally better of 2 very strong teams. There is no third place, of course, at the Euros. If there was, I would predict probably Germany to beat England, simply because having the home crowd behind them. I mean, beating Germany on their own turf to gain a medal, if such game existed, would be pretty special. But ultimately, it's the one game of the tournament that's fairly irrelevant, where neither side can win the tournament, apart from a group game where both teams are already eliminated. So. Finally, the final between the Netherlands and France. It could equally be Germany against France, could equally be Netherlands or Germany against England. Or even Portugal might have something to say about that, even a few others. But this is only my personal prediction. I'm going to predict that the French will have probably too much strength when push comes to shove, and will win probably 2-1 or 1-0. So, France to win. Most of the people, I do ask all of my friends predictions, and the majority of people are saying France or England, with the majority probably favouring France. Although that was the case, it was between France and Belgium at the last European Championships. And of course, neither one France in the second round, as I've said twice before. Belgium in the quarterfinals. So we can never ever be too sure. Italy had crept up unnoticed. They were on a very long unbeaten run, more than 30 games I think going into the tournament, and snuck in through the back door, kind of as they did at Eurovision in the same year. First time the Eurovision winner has gone on to win the men's Euros in the same calendar year, albeit a certain virus has probably a lot to do with that. Anyway, that concludes my predictions. So just to recap, I've gone for France to win, the Netherlands to get to the final, England and Germany to be the beaten semi-finalists, Croatia, Spain, Portugal and Belgium, just had to read through my notes again, excuse me, to be eliminated in the quarterfinals. Right, that's it. Thank you. If you made it this far, I thank you most deeply from the bottom of my heart. I'm not sure I would have, but then I've got, well, the attention span of a goldfish, so that's not saying much. The joys of being neurodivergent. Although on the flip side, it gives me probably a passion and an interest and a knowledge of football that, you know, well, it's pretty useless, but having that knowledge, but it does make me friends. Anyway, please let me know what you think in the comments, whether on my personal page or in my International Football Nerds group or in the football chat group. So, enjoy the Euros, everyone. I look forward to watching a game in a different pub each time, ticking off venues that I've never watched a game in before, as I do, again, the wonders of neurodiversity. And I hope wherever you watch it, whoever you're supporting, your team does well, but not better than England if you're not English. Wink. Anyway, enjoy the Euros. Cheers.